Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into the spring 2025 issue of People of Africa magazine.
That's right. You sent us this really fascinating collection.
Yeah, an incredible mix. And our mission, as always, is to pull out the most, compelling bits for you,
We'll be covering quite a bit: international relations, economics.
right through to personal development, culture, art, sport, the whole gamut, really, all centered on Africa.
And the source material itself is, well, it's broad. You've got editorials on Africa's global position, sharp takes on international justice.
Discussions on self-care, especially for men, which is interesting.
Definitely. Plus explorations of art, sport, even a bit of romance advice, and home decor tips. It's a real tapestry.
It is. So our goal for you is simple. Walk away informed, maybe a little surprised, but definitely not overwhelmed.
We're looking for those aha moments, trying to connect the dots between these sometimes seemingly unrelated pieces.
Exactly, highlighting what really matters. Okay, so let's dive in. First up, an editorial called America First and the Ghosts of Expansionism, Why Africa Must Choose Itself.
Ooh, provocative title.
It starts with this Maasai proverb
Hmm.
about a shepherd and his sheep. What did you make of that opening?
It's quite striking, isn't it? It uses that parable as a lens, really,
Mm-hmm.
to look at a potential comeback of, well, expansionist ideas.
Specifically referencing the America First doctrine, thinking about a potential second Trump term.
Yeah, and the scope isn't just Africa. It mentions Canada, Greenland, Havana, even Gaza. It's pretty wide-ranging. Makes you think about historical patterns.
It does, and it gets very specific. It talks about possible U.S. bids for Greenland.
Right, and Alberta maybe becoming a U.S. state.
And that really disturbing proposal about relocating Palestinians from Gaza to the Sinai, it feels historical almost,
That's exactly the point the editorial seems to be making. It draws lines back to things like the Guano Islands Act.
which I had to look up. Basically, historical U.S. claims on islands for resources.
Exactly. And it connects that to the expansion of AFRICOM, suggesting this ongoing strategic focus on Africa's resources, lithium, cobalt, the critical stuff.
And then it pulls out the big one, the Berlin Conference of 1884.
Oof, yeah. The carving up of Africa by European powers.
It's used as this stark reminder, isn't it, about past exploitation and the danger of outside powers calling the shots.
And the key thing it contrasts is the diplomatic style. It sets up the Biden era's talk of partnership of equals.
Against what it predicts would be a return to a much more transactional, ultimatum-based approach under Trump.
The phrase they use is brutal: stand with us or starve.
Wow, that really sets the stakes.
It does, but it's not all doom and gloom. The editorial really emphasizes Africa's own strengths.
The resource wealth is staggering when you see the figures, like 30% of global mineral reserves.
And 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land, plus that huge young population, that's massive potential.
So the piece argues the real question isn't if Africa can forge its own path, but
But whether its leaders will actually choose to, whether they'll reject that shepherd's crooked staff, as the editorial puts it.
and it gives examples of progress, right? Steps towards self-reliance,
Definitely, like the African Continental Free Trade Area, the FCFTA.
aiming for that single market across the continent. It says it's boosted intra-African trade by, what, 22% already?
Which is pretty significant in just 5 years. And they give concrete examples, too. Rwanda using drones for vaccine delivery in Nigeria.
South African electric buses in Congo. It shows things are actually happening on the ground.
And another big one is the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, PAPSS.
Right, letting countries trade in their own currencies, cutting out the middleman, saving billions.
About $5 billion a year, apparently. That's a direct hit against reliance on the dollar, boosting economic freedom.
The piece also mentions AU Agenda 2063 projects, things like the Lagos-Abidjan Highway
Which could be a game changer for West African trade.
and Project Sankofa. That Ghana initiative using looted artifacts as collateral for loans? That's creative.
It's about reclaiming agency in unexpected ways, isn't it?
But the editorial doesn't ignore the hurdles. It talks about continuing pressures.
Yeah, like the IMF pressure on Ethiopia over the Grand Renaissance Dam, tying it to debt relief.
And those potentially exploitative contracts for Senegal's new oil finds. There's a quote that really sticks.
We are told to be grateful for investments that strip us bare. That sums up the dilemma, doesn't it?
It really does. And it draws those historical lines again, the CIA in Congo back in 1960.
Contrasting it with current U.S. positions on things like BRICS or WHO funding, suggesting a pattern of self-interest.
But crucially, it also highlights resistance, examples of Africa pushing back.
like South Africa finding new markets for its steel after U.S. tariffs.
Or Nigeria opening that huge Dangote refinery, potentially cutting reliance on U.S. fuel imports. These are big moves.
And I like the Rwanda example, partnering with OneWeb after Starlink apparently throttled their service. It shows there are alternatives.
The editorial then coins these terms: resource sovereignty,
Controlling your own natural wealth, like Zimbabwe's lithium law,
climate justice,
fair treatment on climate change impacts. That Congo Basin carbon credit deal fits there.
and tech sovereignty.
Building independent tech capacity. Senegal's Silicon Delta Initiative is an example. It's about charting a course.
And choosing partners, not masters, like the AU working with Turkey on vaccines, or Kenya insisting on local contractors for that big railway project.
Exactly. It concludes by invoking Emperor Menelik II's victory at Adwa,
A major historical win against European colonizers.
setting a precedent for African agency. It leaves you feeling that Africa has the tools and the history to navigate this.
Definitely a powerful piece. Okay, let's move to the next editorial. This one asks a pretty fundamental question. Justice or just us? Do the world's highest courts serve justice or the West?
Yeah, this takes aim at the big international courts, the ICJ and the ICC, questioning their impartiality.
It lays out this pattern right away. A gavel for the global South, a shield for the West.
Implying a double standard, basically, depending on who's in the dock,
It contrasts rulings against, say, Myanmar or Russia.
with what it portrays as relative impunity for the U.S. and its allies.
And it flags South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the ICJ as a moment that could expose this alleged judicial imperialism.
The stats it uses for the ICC are, well, they're stark. 42 out of 46 individuals charged since 2002 being African. That's 91%.
That's a staggering number. And the quote, all but one defendant convicted at the ICC has been a black man. That hits hard.
It really makes you pause and think about potential systemic bias, doesn't it?
And then it points to the U.S. itself not ratifying the Rome Statute that created the ICC.
And actively working against it in the past with sanctions and visa bans on ICC officials. It raises questions about commitment to universal justice.
The editorial also highlights the system's built-in limits, particularly the UN Security Council veto.
That Nicaragua versus U.S. case from 1986 is a classic example. The ICJ ruled against the U.S., and the U.S. just ignored it.
Because of the Security Council structure, it shows the enforcement problem against powerful nations.
And the dive into the South Africa v. Israel case at the ICJ really brings these tensions into the present day.
The genocide accusations, the provisional measures ordered by the court, these are major international legal developments.
And the U.S. response, as outlined in the piece, a reported letter to the UN, basically saying they'd shield Israel, the past withdrawal from the UN Human Rights Council.
Alleged lobbying against South Africa, continued military aid. It paints a picture of obstruction, not impartiality, according to the editorial.
So it circles back to that core theme, the asymmetry of international law. ICC going after African figures, but hesitating with Western allies.
And powerful nations just disregarding rulings they don't like. Russia and Ukraine be another current example.
The conclusion is pretty radical. Dismantled the Security Council veto monopoly.
Otherwise, it argues, these courts will always risk being seen as tools of asymmetric justice.
It's a really critical perspective on how international law actually functions or doesn't function in practice.
A sobering read. Okay. Shifting focus quite dramatically now. The next piece is called The Time for African Unity Is Now, Embracing the Spirit of the Naive Daughter.
That sounds much more hopeful. A call for collaboration, it seems.
Exactly. It argues for greater African unity, especially now with all the global uncertainty.
And it uses that phrase, a naive daughter of Africa, for Mia Motley, as a symbol of, what, optimism? Determination.
I think both. Optimistic determination despite the challenges. It acknowledges the history, of course, colonialism, neocolonialism.
The forces that have historically divided the continent.
But it quickly pivots to the practical upsides of unity. Pooling resources, sharing knowledge.
Amplifying Africa's voice on the world stage. Makes sense.
And the economic arguments, better trade deals, attracting more investment, boosting that intra-African trade we talked about.
And the AfCFTA gets another mention here, naturally, as a key vehicle for that integration.
It doesn't gloss over the difficulties, though: corruption, governance issues, ethnic tensions, conflicts.
But it frames them as surmountable.
Right.
Through collective action.
Yes. The core message is really about a mindset shift, moving from cynicism and division
towards optimism and unity, taking collective ownership of the future.
a powerful appeal. Okay, now let's switch gears completely. The magazine has a men's special issue
Oh, interesting. How does that start?
with an editor's letter titled A Spring Bloom of Gratitude. It's basically a thank you note to men.
For their contributions.
Yeah, specifically mentioning fathers, husbands, brothers, uncles, mentors, friends, acknowledging the roles they play, often quietly.
That's a nice sentiment, recognizing the often unnoticed efforts.
And it frames the whole special issue as a prompt for men to prioritize their own well-being, to be a little selfish, is the phrase used.
Connecting men's self-care to the health of the whole family and community.
Exactly. The idea being, if men look after themselves, they're better able to support others. It promises content tailored to men's self-care advice, inspiring stories.
A thoughtful focus. What comes next in that section?
Well, right after that, there's a piece called From One Woman to Million of Men, The Female Code. Sounds like relationship advice.
Ah, okay. What's the main takeaway?
Communication, communication, communication. The headline calls it your secret weapon. Honesty is key, letting your partner know what you're thinking and feeling.
And listening to, presumably.
Absolutely. Listen first, speak second. It stresses how much women value feeling truly heard and understood, even if you can't fix the problem right away.
That makes sense. Any specific tips?
Oh yeah, a whole subsection on how to win arguments without losing her.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's actually quite practical. Use I statements, validate her feelings, ask open-ended questions, repeat back what you heard.
So active listening techniques, basically.
Pretty much. Plus, know when to apologize sincerely, stay calm, pick your battles, be specific, and always try to end on a positive note.
That's quite a checklist, but solid advice.
Right. The main point is strengthening the connection, not just being right.
A good principle for any relationship, really.
Definitely. Following that, still in the men's section, is an article titled Choose You First, Prioritizing Self-Care for 2025.
Reinforcing that earlier message from the editor.
Exactly. It argues self-care isn't indulgence, it's essential, especially for busy men juggling roles.
And it outlines the benefits.
Eh.
Less stress, better relationships.
Lower stress and anxiety, stronger relationships, even boosted productivity. All pretty crucial.
Does it address why men might struggle with this?
It does. It talks about societal pressures around masculinity, lack of time, and sometimes, yeah, stigma or shame about focusing on yourself.
So what are the suggested solutions, the actionable steps?
Things like actually scheduling self-care time like you would a meeting, exploring new interests, prioritizing physical health exercise, sleep.
Seeking support when needed, friends, professionals.
Right, and practicing mindfulness, just incorporating those moments of calm.
I liked the 3 health habits idea: body, mind, and spirit.
Me too. Mind. Mindfulness, learning, connecting. Body. Fitness, nutrition, sleep. Spirit. Gratitude, doing enjoyable things. Nature. It's holistic.
Very well-rounded. And the daily rituals.
Little things. Morning stretch, mindful breathing, gratitude journaling, quick meditation, hydration break, self-reflection, manageable stuff.
And it mentions tools like Headspace, Calm, online therapy options, making it accessible.
Yeah. The whole piece reframes choosing you first, not as selfish, but as redefining what it means to be a provider and protector. A healthier you makes for a healthier family.
A strong message. And does it get even more specific on health and wellness?
It does. The next bit is Beauty, Health, and Wellness Tips for Men, subtitled Redefining Strength.
Connecting looking good and feeling good with masculinity.
Yeah.
Challenging old stereotypes.
Precisely. It tackles things like nutrition for preventing hair loss first.
Oh, practical. What nutrients does it mention?
Biotin, zinc, iron, omega-3s. And it suggests local food sources, plus a hair health smoothie recipe. Very user-friendly.
Nice. What about skin?
Similar approach. Foods for radiant skin, key nutrients like vitamin C, E, collagen boosters, water-rich foods. Again, highlighting local superfoods, and even a DIY face mask idea.
Making it feel achievable. And grooming basics.
Yep. Grooming 101 covers beard care, skin care, scalp health. There's a nice pro tip about using a traditional wooden comb. Simple, effective.
And crucially, checkups.
Yes. Emphasizes annual physicals, skin checks, hormonal tests if needed, thyroid screening. Includes advice from a Nigerian dermatologist, which adds great perspective.
So it ends with a call to action.
Yeah, revamp your plate, create a routine, and importantly, break the silence around men's health issues. Own your wellness journey.
A comprehensive guide. Okay, let's shift tone completely now. What's this about flowers?
Yes, a lovely piece called The Floral Secret. Spring blooms that brighten summer too.
Okay, intriguing. What's the secret?
It's all about choosing spring flowers that dry well so you can keep enjoying them through the summer, extending the season indoors.
Smart. Which flowers does it recommend?
Peonies, lavender, hydrangeas, eucalyptus are the main ones. It explains why they're good for drying and gives tips. Daisies get a mention too.
And tells you how to dry them.
Yes, practical advice on when to cut them. The air drying method, even using a bit of hairspray to preserve them. Easy stuff.
And decor ideas.
Yeah, lovely suggestions for using the dried flowers, mantelpiece displays, table runners, making wreaths. Just nice ways to bring nature inside for longer.
A charming little section.
Mm.
Okay, back to the heavy hitters. The untold story behind U.S. sanctions and a nation's defiance. South Africa.
Right. This gets into the complex reasons behind recent U.S. sanctions on South Africa.
It asks up front, is it about solidarity with Palestine, or is it more about the deepening BRICS ties? Or both?
Exactly. It suggests it's probably multi-layered. It starts by outlining that long history between the ANC and the PLO.
Back to the anti-apartheid days, right? Joint training, intelligence sharing.
Yeah, and it recalls that famous Mandela quote about Palestinian freedom, showing how deep that connection runs.
And connects it to recent actions downgrading the embassy in Tel Aviv, the ICJ case against Israel.
Noting how South Africa explicitly draws parallels between apartheid and the situation in Palestine.
The article then brings in the U.S. perspective, citing leaked cables, suggesting frustration. Like, they're using our own human rights playbook against us.
A fascinating glimpse into diplomatic friction, but then it pivots to the BRICS angle.
South Africa's membership, the growing trade with China.
And that reported $10 billion deal with China to trade minerals outside the U.S. dollar system, maybe using a BRICS currency. That's presented as a big deal.
A potential tipping point. Plus, the central bank moving reserves into yuan and rubles. Eskom settling oil deals in gold-backed currencies. It's a pattern.
It notes Trump calling BRICS a club of autocrats, but points out the irony given members like India and Brazil are democracies.
Then it weaves in another thread, Elon Musk.
Right. His criticisms of South Africa's Black Economic Empowerment, BE, policies.
Which, for context, are like affirmative action policies aimed at redressing apartheid-era economic imbalances.
And the whole dispute over Starlink data sovereignty, Musk's alleged retaliation on X and throttling service speeds, it adds a very personal modern conflict layer.
It also points out the historical irony the U.S. once labeling Mandela a terrorist, while Israel reportedly supported the apartheid regime.
And now South Africa is apparently using Russian drones and partnering with Iran. The shifts are significant.
It juxtaposes old ANC rhetoric about sanctions, too little too late, with Ramaphosa's recent comment calling U.S. actions a tantrum of a fading empire.
Shows a consistent defiance, doesn't it? Though it does acknowledge the potential economic pain for South Africa, rand falling, inflation.
But also mentions strong public support, 68% for the Palestine stance. It concludes with that powerful line.
Mines, once freed, cannot be recolonized, suggesting a commitment to an independent path regardless of cost.
A really complex picture. Next up, reparations and respect. Lessons from Sarah Bartman's journey. This feels important.
Deeply important. It uses Sarah Bartman's story to argue that reparations aren't just about money.
It's about dignity, right? Acknowledging the harm.
Exactly. Reclaiming dignity. It describes her as a radiant daughter of the Khoikhoi from the Eastern Cape.
And recounts how she was taken to Europe in 1810, displayed as the Hottentot Venus, utterly dehumanizing.
In London, then Paris. It even notes the bizarre paradox of European fashion adopting corsets to mimic her shape while she was being objectified.
Highlighting the cruelty and contradiction of it all.
It speaks of her suffering, loneliness, her death in Paris in 1815, and the final indignity dissection, parts of her body displayed.
For almost 200 years, her remains were in a museum. It's horrifying.
The article then covers the long fight by South Africans for her return.
Which finally happened in 2002. A momentous occasion.
Today, she's seen as this symbol of African pride, resilience, and a call to reclaim the narratives of African women.
So the article loops back to reparations, emphasizing it's about acknowledgement, respect, and dismantling those lingering structures of exploitation.
A very moving piece, shifting now to something more contemporary and hopeful, maybe. An interview with Sudanese music producer Ehab Abasside.
Healing through harmony. Ehab Abasside's dream for Africa. What's his vision?
He talks passionately about music's power to heal and unite, especially in conflict zones like Sudan and Congo, how it evokes memory, empowers people.
And bridges divides, cultural, Linguistic?
Yes. He uses a lovely analogy like cooking with diverse ingredients to create something amazing and unified.
And he wants to create a Pan-African anthem, like
Yeah.
We Are the World.
Exactly that. Inspired by We Are the World. His vision is ambitious, multiple languages, English, Arabic, Swahili, French, local dialects.
Celebrating Africa's beauty, landscapes, cultures, people.
He imagines collaborating with musicians from every region, north, east, south, west, maybe 3 from each, and a music video showcasing the whole continent.
Wow. That's a huge undertaking. Does he acknowledge the challenges?
Oh, yeah, funding, logistics, coordinating everyone, but he makes this heartfelt plea for support to make it happen.
It's a beautiful idea, isn't it? Using art to foster that shared identity.
Truly. Okay, back to the diplomatic front line. A diplomatic storm in a teacup. South Africa's ambassador, Ibrahim Rasool.
Ah, yes. The ambassador expelled from the U.S. What's the angle here?
It covers the incident Rasool calling the Magie movement a white supremacist relic.
Which prompted Senator Rubio to declare him persona non grata on X. Very public.
The article gives Rasool's background in the anti-apartheid movement, framing his comments within that context.
Connecting him to figures like Biko and Mandela. A lineage of defiance.
It also notes a pattern under the Trump administration of hitting back against critical diplomats from other countries.
Latin America, Sweden. And it outlines the supposed blueprint of retaliation. Isolate, intimidate, inflame.
The piece then considers the potential downsides for U.S. interests in Africa alienating South Africa, a major economic player and key to AfCFTA access.
And it brings up that historical irony again, U.S. support for apartheid South Africa versus now ejecting a black diplomat echoing Mandela's values.
It even digs into the term persona non grata itself, its colonial origins, how it was used against leaders like Lumumba and Nkrumah, adds historical weight.
How does it see other African nations responding?
It suggests possibilities, AU unity, or maybe cautious neutrality, mentions mixed early reactions from Nigeria and Botswana, recalls Haile Selassie's 1963 UN speech on racial superiority.
And how does South Africa react in the end?
Defiantly, according to the article, mentioning a new trade deal with Indonesia bypassing the dollar, and Ramaphosa's, quote, "We will not be gagged."
Seems this teacup might have wider ripples. Okay, let's move to a major success story. From pharaohs to freedom, Egypt's century-long dawn over malaria.
Yes, this celebrates Egypt getting WHO certification as malaria-free, a huge achievement.
Especially given malaria's ancient history there, right? Back to 1500 BCE papyri.
Incredible. It traces the long fight, starting with the malaria control program way back in 1940.
Acknowledging the challenges, quoting people involved in the later stages, like Dr. Layla Kamal.
And details the final push, satellite mapping, rapid diagnostic kits, the vital role of community health workers like Fatima Hassan reaching everyone.
Integrating prevention into daily life, too. Imams talking about it, school children learning.
Making it part of the culture. The piece stresses the significance. Egypt is the most populous country to achieve this. A beacon for Africa.
Includes congrats from the WHO Director General.
Yeah.
A genuine public health triumph.
Absolutely. Now, from public health to the passion of sport, AFCON's sacred pitch about the Africa Cup of Nations.
Ah, AFCON. More than just football, the article suggests.
Much more. A symbol of autonomy, pride, even rebellion, it says. Starts with a kid in Kinshasa dreaming of playing for the Leopards. Very evocative.
And it tackles those dismissive comments from European pundits like Jamie Carragher.
Head on, calls it Eurocentric bias. It reminds us, AFCON started in 1957, same year as Ghana's independence. Deep roots in Pan-Africanism.
And the symbolism of the trophy, the stories of past glories, Zambia 2012, legends like Eto'o, Okocha, Mane.
It then contrasts this with European football's perceived hypocrisy. Cites stats, African players scoring loads of goals in Europe.
But only one African Ballon d'Or winner ever, George Weah, calls it the arithmetic of erasure, using Mo Salah's case as an example.
It vividly describes the unique AFCON atmosphere. The music, the drums, the fans, calls it a rhythm of resistance.
Against the dominance of the European game. It even mentions the economic hit European clubs take when players leave for AFCON.
Hundreds of millions in estimated revenue loss, framing the tournament's timing as deliberate defiance of the European calendar.
Using the baobab tree as a metaphor for Africa's enduring strength, it concludes powerfully.
Saying that playing for Africa at AFCON is to touch eternity really captures the passion.
Definitely. Staying with sport, but shifting focus. The marathoners of the Rift. how Kenya and Ethiopia conquered the world's roads.
Exploring that incredible dominance in distance running starts by painting a picture of the Rift Valley altitude, running to school barefoot.
A natural, tough training ground.
Yeah.
And the stats are mind-blowing. Over 60% of major marathon wins, 80% of world records.
It revisits the legends. Bakila's barefoot win in 60, Kino, Gabrasasi, Bekele, the Kalenjin enigma.
And tries to unpack the science of the soil, altitude, genetics, mentions the ACTN3 gene, biomechanics of running culture.
A mix of factors, but it doesn't shy away from the darker side, the exploitation machine.
Limited reinvestment by sponsors, predatory agents, athletes, switching nationality. A critical look. Quotes Wilson Kipsang on this.
It also notes the new challengers, emerging runners from Uganda, Tanzania, South Sudan, shaking things up.
And looks at how Kenya and Ethiopia are trying to stay on top, fighting doping, using tech, reviving grassroots programs.
Ends with the rhythm of the rift and a quote from Coach Patrick saying about chasing the horizon. A really full picture.
Absolutely fascinating. Okay, let's move to celebrating leadership. Daughters of Africa,
Yes.
women who redefined leadership.
Yes, highlighting women who reached the highest office on the continent. Starts with a general tribute to their resilience and impact.
Then profile specific presidents.
Right. Samia Suluhu Hassan of Tanzania, first female president there, achievements noted on COVID response, media law reform, regional stability.
Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia, Africa's first elected female head of state, Nobel laureate. Key role in ending the Civil War, debt relief, women's rights.
And Joyce Banda of Malawi, first female president there too. Strong advocate for the marginalized, focusing on healthcare, education, women's empowerment.
The Why We're Proud sections for each really drive home their significance. It's inspiring.
Truly. Now for something very practical. Nutrition and meal planning for busy mothers.
Always relevant.
Yeah.
What's the core advice?
Stresses nutrition's role in energy, health, stress management for moms. Offers strategies. Plan ahead, batch cook, use the freezer, shop smart with a list.
Efficient cooking tips, too. One-pot meals, slow cookers.
Exactly. And using leftovers creatively. Standard but solid advice for busy household.
Is there a meal plan?
Yep, a 7-day dinner meal plan with specific ideas and prep tips, plus some nice Sunday spring dinner recipes for frittata, lamb chops, pea soup. Looks delicious and manageable.
Very helpful. Okay, nearly there. An artist profile. The Tanzanian artist.
Yeah.
Samuel Kasili juggling passion and practicality.
A lovely profile. Shares his background financial struggles interrupting school, but art and soccer fueling him.
His journey of finding his artistic voice.
Yeah, and how his art celebrates Tanzanian culture. Vivid colors, patterns, his desire to promote cross-cultural understanding.
But it also acknowledges the reality, right? Balancing art with plumbing work to pay the bills.
Absolutely. The juggling passion and practicality of the title. It touches on his other interests too, soccer fan, Yunga and Barca, hip-hop inspiration, Biggie.
Mentions his educational path, including a football scholarship. Shows his drive.
His dream is still to make a living from art. The piece portrays his dedication and ends with a call to support African artists like him.
A great human story. Finally, an interview on understanding the complexities of the Congo conflict with Kenneth Bwire.
This offers a really critical take on the situation in the DRC. Bwire sounds suspicious of that proposed U.S.-DRC mineral for security deal.
Questioning why external security is needed, and from whom.
Exactly. He stresses the complexity and pushes for internal solutions, patriotism, unity, warns against outside intervention, invoking Lumumba's legacy.
What about Rwanda's alleged role?
He questions the source of their mineral sales, points out Uganda's similar activities, suggests it's murky, maybe multiple actors involved.
And he's critical of the African Union's effectiveness.
Yes, feels it hasn't done enough. Also raises questions about who's funding and arming rebel groups like M23.
What about other African nations trying to help?
He acknowledges past efforts, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Tanzania's mediation, but ultimately points to a lack of effective Congolese leadership as the main obstacle.
So his solution is internal.
Congolese leaders needing to have honest talks, put the country first, not personal gain. He believes that will stop external meddling, a strong call for internal responsibility.
Wow. Okay, we have covered an incredible amount of ground today from this spring 2025 issue.
And we really have. So key takeaways for you listening. I think it's clear Africa is at this really critical moment defining its global relationships.
Absolutely. And that ongoing struggle for genuine international justice, the themes of unity, self-reliance, they keep coming up.
And the power of individuals, artists like Kasili, athletes from the Rift Valley, leaders like the women presidents shaping the continent's story.
Some intriguing things to ponder, too.
Hmm.
Those parallels between old colonial tactics and modern economic pressures.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And the sheer resilience and ingenuity you see, whether it's fighting malaria or dominating marathon routes.
Plus, those nuanced takes on self-care and relationships. Lots to reflect on there personally, perhaps.
Definitely. Look, this deep dive, it's just a scratch on the surface, isn't it?
Completely. If any of this resonated, we really encourage you to find the full People of Africa Spring 2025 issue. There's so much more in there.
For sure. And maybe a final thought to leave you with.
Go on.
In this world, awash with information, where narratives are constantly spun, what role do you think individuals have? How can we ensure the real stories, the true potential of a continent like Africa, are actually seen and understood? Something to think about.